You're called a lunatic, a bioterrorist, a con artist, a world-class bigot, and starvation advocate. What do you have to say for yourself?
What do I have to say for myself? Man, oh man.
Next speaker will be Joel Salatin, who is a farmer, lecturer, and author.
He describes himself as an evangelical, Christian conservative, environmentalist, lunatic farmer.
He's kind of the godfather, not of just like homesteading, but of sustainable farming and a lot of these other practices that he's put into play.
Your approach to farming is so natural and so normal and so, in my opinion, non-controversial.
We were branded Luddites and anti-progressives, anti-science.
We got a knock on the door. You've been selling illegal meat, and we've confiscated it all. You know, Lord, if we lose this thing, what do you have in mind here?
It's never been like this. What happened? Regulatory, extortion, tyranny.
Them was the days.
Them was the days.
When I watch your method, it seems normal, it seems like common sense, it seems like old knowledge, but yet you're looked at as some sort of a wild man out there.
A lunatic. All right, it's probably time to go to breakfast.
Now, what is that weird flip thing there that you have? I haven't seen that. Is that?
This thing's been in ponds and cow troughs and it just keeps on ticking, man.
Well, welcome to this February edition of Doug Wilson and Friends. We've got Doug Wilson.
Hi.
And we've got friends, Jared Longshore, the one and only Wade from The Joe Show. But you just saw there an ad for the new Joel Salatin documentary, which Canon Plus is releasing later this week. I've not yet seen this, but you have.
I have.
And you said you were surprised that you enjoyed it the way that you did, or something. How did you say?
Yeah. So I've been aware of Joel Salatin for a few decades, and he was always occupying a space that I didn't have much space for. He's a believer, an evangelical Christian, and I always knew that about him. But he was also trumpeted and honored by the sort of the hipster, crunchy world.
Yeah.
Which I've, as a general rule, I don't have a lot of use for that. And so I just sort of, okay. I was aware of him for a number of years. And then I watched this documentary, Lunatic Farmer, and it was really an enjoyable thing to walk through all the different things he's doing, how he's managing his land, how his yields per acre are outperform typical farming techniques, et cetera. And of course, I had some yeah buts in the back of my mind, but he has a lot to commend him. He's innovative, cheerful, not angsty, not uptight about anything. He's just doing it his way, and a lot of what he's doing makes a lot of good sense for how he, puts the chicken coop on wheels.
Instead of going to it, you bring it to you.
Well, no, it's so you can move the chicken coop across pasture, and the chickens fertilize different.
Fertilizer.
And they do their chickens don't graze, but they do
their pecking.
They're pecking at different areas, and it's good for the land. It's good for the things like that were really interesting. And of course, one of the things I wanted to know was, okay, is this one of the problems with hipster food? Is that people want to buy a $5 apple and pretend that they're close to the rhythms of the earth. This is just niche food for rich people. If you want to be in touch with the common people, you get your milk at Walmart.
Right.
But if you go to Whole Foods, that the prices are elevated, et cetera. And I wanted to I saw his yields. What's the price of his goods? But then talking to Nate, my son Nate, he said yes, but you also have to factor in subsidies for conventional farming. So we don't have a
apples to apples comparison.
And we have a comparison that is apples to apples.
That's right. Good. We'll look forward to looking at that. Interestingly, he actually has, I think, been nominated for some role in the Trump administration. I remember, right after, I think he was, which was
something with the FDA,
something with the FDA or something like that, which is kind of interesting. And this is our first Doug Wilson and Friends since the inauguration and all of the activity over the last month or so. And so, I guess just the first question is are you in fact tired of winning yet?
Not even close.
Not even close.
In fact, it still feels like losing.
What's the most notable? What's your most in the last month of just flurry of activity? What's your most notable that was surprising and amazing?
I think I was pleased that his first ones had to do with immigration. I think because that shows that he knows why he won. At least what the pain was that people were feeling. And it was showing I'm the same guy that you voted in and declaring an emergency at the border and things like that. I thought those were good. It's been tough for me to keep up and I like it. So I can't imagine being somebody who doesn't and somebody who's can't open their news apps in the morning.
One thing at a time.
Yes.
Make sure that we understand it all. And
right. I remember, I think Steve Bannon back in 2019 said something like that he wanted to hit people fast with wins. And he was saying that because the media can only talk about one thing at a time. And so we'll do 3 things a day and they'll latch onto one and then we'll be on to the next thing the next day. And I think that theory that happened back in 2019 has happened now that wasn't happening at that point.
Only it's 30 things a day instead of
right. That's right. And I prefer that pace. And I remember, I think also J.D. Vance said something about that we should get used to this pace. And I think I could.
Right.
I could get used to it.
If in 6 months we're wait, what did they do now? That would be good.
Right. Yeah. I like waking up to 10 new things to be excited about.
Yeah. The speed is actually one of the chief things to be excited about. We're such a big nation. You wonder what's really going on? It's just huge, And to see them getting so many things done so quickly I think it's inspiring all sorts of organizations, all my conversations with guys, everyone has the Doge vibe right now. People are just kind of riffing off of that and starting to put their own houses in order. So that's a win. Policy-wise, I think this is going to take more time to see what actually gets done, but all of the talk about shutting down the Department of Education is remarkable. I read in Up From Conservatism, a book, I think Claremont Institute put it out. It's got all these different policies in it. And when it comes to education, this was exactly their proposal. They're basically, we need all the classical Christian schools that we can get, and we need homeschooling and whatnot, but on a national level, if we're being honest about where we're at the moment, the next best step for us is to destroy the Department of Education, send it all back to the states. That's really the next tangible move you can do from the top down. And that made sense to me, knowing a little bit about that world. It's if you're going to break the whole thing, you're going to have to start by getting it off of the federal dimension, get it back down to the states. And so to hear him actually saying this is what we're going to do is remarkable. To actually figure out what it's going to look like, all of that money gets washed around. So if you're in Florida at a particular county, if you're a superintendent, you're getting a significant amount of money from your state, but you're getting a huge portion of your budget is coming from the federal government. It's still there. And so that shakes down to all these different states. I'm very interested in seeing this actually become tangible. How are you going to deal with the budget adjustments if you're in Rhode Island or if you're in Texas? Those are going to be 2 very different experiences for superintendents. And if you actually start putting the screws to that and getting it back down to the states, that's the first step to getting rid of it entirely. So I'm excited about that.
I'd say amen to both of those things, but the thing I'm most excited about is the supply line aspect of what Elon is doing, because Doge is going after all the waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, it turns out that has not a side effect, but one of the main impacts is that it is revealing that the left was not nearly as formidable as it appeared. There's a lot of astroturf going on, a lot of rent-a-mob sort of protests, and if you cut off the center right of the main body of the American populace was funding both sides of the culture war.
Right. Yeah.
One voluntarily.
One through taxation and one voluntarily.
One voluntarily. We've got to fight what the bad guys are doing, and then we pay our taxes that funds what the bad guys are doing. And this whole Doge thing has revealed that there's a paper tiger there. The left has been very, very clever in making us think that they are this invincible juggernaut connected to George Soros, who has an infinite amount of money.
Right.
But it turns out a lot of the money
was our money.
Was our money. And I remember this was years ago. I was in San Diego for some reason. I was walking downtown San Diego, and I walked past the Center for the Empowerment of Deaf Alcoholics. And I thought, there has to be government money involved. But I think, okay, that's clearly right. But now multiply that by 100,000 and then cut it all off. This is just glory days.
And starting with Doge, starting with the stuff that was going overseas, I think that was a smart move initially to just show, oh, that's how much we're wasting it. We're wasting it out there.
Right.
And then a lot of those policies, a lot of the things that they're supporting at home are the same kinds of things.
Let me add a footnote to this, because you began with, are we tired of the winning yet? And I know that some people, the never Trumpers or the worried sisters in the evangelical world,
The growling conservatives who follow radicalism to perdition and just want to slow up.
When they say winning, it's like, come on, Elon just had his 13th illegitimate child by some woman, and Trump is not a godly man. But I feel like, and we should say,
right.
We're not denying that. We know that, and we disapprove of that, and I think Patton probably cussed a bit too much.
Probably so. Yeah.
So if you were at church, let's say during the Second World War, and someone gave a prayer request, let's thank the Lord for our boys won this battle in Europe, and they're that much closer to Berlin, and we're praying the war will be over. And if somebody else stood up and said, well, I don't think that Patton is really born again. I'd say, what do you think we're doing? We're not claiming that this is a righteousness operation, although the left is starting to think it is. So Salon wrote an article saying that Elon Musk's savage cuts are simply a cover for Christian nationalism. And
then one hopes.
one hopes. But they pointed to Russ Voigt, who's going to be a savage at OMB, and who's a graduate of Wheaton, and who got them in he didn't get them in trouble. They got themselves in trouble. But the point is, of course, that's a secular space. These are a number of them are carnal men, but there are a number of evangelical believers all through this movement who are not carnal men. And there are observers like us who look at what's happening and say the fact that Patton is not regenerate does not reduce in the slightest my joy over the fact that he won the battle.
Right.
Particularly with reading the story, it's important to read the story. When Jehu is raised up in the north and goes slaughtering Baal worship, you can guarantee there's something wrong about Jehu. Like Jehu, we know he didn't get rid of the sin of Jeroboam, so he didn't go reformed all the way down. And I guarantee he had a lot of motives going on inside of him. But what's interesting is that Elisha's the one who's sent to anoint him. Like, he gets appointed to that position by God's word. And this is where people get weird on the God and country thing. I don't have a picture of Jesus and Trump in my kitchen, okay? So not there.
Or anywhere else.
Or anywhere else.
Let's just be clear.
That one's in the living room.
Yeah. I won't talk about what's in the living room. But you actually do need to be reading, like the same way God works in Cyrus. He stirred in Cyrus's heart. He raised up Jehu. If you think this is merely natural, so there's something natural to it, and we need to understand it on that plane. I think conservatives have just gotten fed up with what's happened, and they're eager to see government cut down. But the sons of Issachar thing is like also go like, what is God doing? Because yes, Elon did just have his 13th kid or whatever it is outside of wedlock, and and we need to know we're not necessarily in a Josiah's Reformation situation. I don't know that we discovered the law of God and then actually repented all the way down. But you need to see what God's doing in the midst of it, and what conservatives that are still kind of secularized are doing in it in order to play this particular situation in the right way.
In other words, God does things short of full tilt Reformation.
You mentioned Claremont earlier. It makes me think of Jeremy Carl, who's been here before and good Christian guy. But he talked about how at the end of his book, he lays out some things that nationally the country could do to address a lot of the problems.
End anti-white racism, end kind of federal policy, which is what his book's about. And
and he talked recently about how he said, I don't know that my book is leading this cause, but my wish list is done now.
They checked it off.
They did it all. And so, we can be glad that, Jeremy Carl is having an influence there, and people like Russ Vought and folks like that.
Well, so keep talking about Elon for a minute, because I think he actually is this really interesting figure in the story God's telling. Because there is a way in which if typically Trump was Trump sucked all the oxygen out of the room, and now you have another figure who has that ability. And I think if you'd have said to me, is Trump able to share the limelight with anybody? No, he's not. Like, he's not that kind of figure. And yet it seems manifest now that he actually is.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a real, there's an opportunity there for the other folks to realize Elon's going to be doing this, and it's going to attract all of the eyes as he's cutting everything.
He's doing what the traditional role of the vice president has been.
Right.
And Vance is being a more civilized, ordinary vice president. So Elon is the lightning rod. It used to be the president was the respectable, above the fray guy, and then the vice president would be Spiro Agnew, goes out and challenges the nattering nabobs of negativism and draws all the fire. Well, Elon's doing that now, and then Vance is doing that in a secondary way. So Elon is protecting both the president and the vice president.
Right, and which creates lots of space to run, because of the media can only talk about one thing at a time, and it's easy for it to. Elon's got enough money; he's uncancelable. He can just suck up all that oxygen of attention, while all of these other executive orders are being carried out by the new people that are being put in office, cutting things and then getting guys in positions, and all of it comes back to him in a way that's like, well, that's fine. He doesn't care.
Yeah,
it's a really good news also for succession. So, what you mentioned about can he share the limelight? I'm sure being almost 80 helps with that. He knows he's going to have to hand this off to some people, and it seems like he's handing it off to some capable guys.
Yeah, he's got people who know what they're doing. With JD Vance, so he's gone to Europe and kind of walked into the den of lambs over there, and told them what's what.
Right.
What did you think of? Did you see his speech?
I saw
speech.
I saw the parts that upset them. But the thing and this is a weird. This is the weirdest thing in the world, because the progressive left have allowed themselves to be maneuvered into the corner of being the fuddies.
Right.
They're the censorious ones. They're the Pharisees. They're the anti-free speech. They're the establishment. And J.D. Vance goes over and wraps their opposition to free speech around their necks and says that you feel far more threatened by your own voters than you do by external threats. And it was just magnificently done. He spoke like a grown-up. He spoke like a grown-up man. He didn't care that they were going to be really in a snit when he was done, which they were. And I just thought it was glorious.
Yeah. Well, when you get a the CBS or CNN or whoever it was news lady responding to the Holocaust was started by free speech too.
It's caused by free speech.
Yeah, like when you get the left to actually go there,
Right.
because and you just try to get inside their head a little bit and go, how did they get there? And it was something like, well, we know that Trump and Vance are Nazis, and they're defending free speech, and so the Nazis must have been in favor of free speech.
And so Trump needs to sign an executive order to make sure that lady is on air every night.
That's right. Well,
Send USAID money to her. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Like we'll redirect some of it. Well, and of course it was the lady who I don't really care, Margaret. It was her. Is that lady decided I haven't been I haven't been a meme enough.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to turn myself into even more of one. Are there other? So one of the things I think is interesting is there is a certain kind of conservative who the Never Trumpers or the Worried Sisters who look at some of Trump's appointments, RFK, Tulsi, and some of these, and are very indignant about it and want to say something like, I remember when conservatives would never have supported a pro-abortion conspiracy theorist to be Health and Human Services. Mm-hmm. What thoughts on that? Like on just like, hey, is that cost of doing business? Should we be happy that RFK's in there, or is that a lamentable thing?
The overall pattern of conservatives my entire adult life is socialists and liberals running on this grandiose thing. The conservatives in the opposition of the election say that's not going to work. That's not going to work. And then the commie gets elected anyway. They implement the whatever it is, the Great Society or
war on poverty, war on everything.
Yeah, whatever it is. They implement that, and sure enough, it doesn't work. And then conservatives run on, we can make it work.
Yeah.
And so the conservative move is always to come behind the commies and try to make their programs manageable.
This is the Chesterton quip about it's the progressives' job to break things and the conservatives' job to make sure they don't get fixed.
Right. And then Dabney's line about there's a certain kind of conservatism that is the shadow that follows radicalism to perdition. It just tags along. So the criticism that they're mounting toward RFK and Tulsi makes perfect sense 20 years ago when we were still trying to make things work, right? But we're trying to make things, we're trying to make the rubble bounce. So yeah, if we were in a situation where RFK was going to be put in charge of abortion policy, it'd be terrible compromise, and but he's going in there as a wrecking ball, and that place needs a wrecking ball, and the intelligence community needs a wrecking ball, and I'm not going to be too fastidious about the exact shape of the wrecking ball. You have to be concerned about that sort of thing when you're dealing with constructive policy. RFK would be a disaster as a president. But he has said on life issues that he's going to he's going to conform to whatever Trump wants. And I think he has far greater interest in other issues. Yeah. And my interest in that is the wrecking ball value. I want to see the CDC a smoking crater.
On this old conservative, young conservative paradigm, this is one of the most interesting things to me, watching how much they're getting done and how quickly they're getting it done. And my sense is that the vibe shift that has occurred is going to stay. To whatever degree the OK Boomer thing was like not honoring our fathers, and that needed to be adjusted, there's still there's a generational shift happening. And I turned 40 recently, so I'm looking at
poor baby.
Yeah, I know, right? I had a crisis, and what's weird is I discovered all these other guys that I thought were like a little bit older. I was like, I like having older friends. They're like, dude, I'm 37. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the worst. But I can tell where my generation seems very comfortable with getting things done, knowing it's not going to be perfect. So all of these problems that where the persnickety kind that are like raising the flag about Elon's problems or Trump's problems, like the vibes right now are like, no, get it done. Like get it done, and then if you go down for me, I just sense more and more comfortability with the problems that are going to arise. So it makes me. My sense is like what's here, what they've done recently is really going to last. I think there could be a huge runway of getting a lot of things done. So I'm wondering, if I were the devil, how do I actually break this momentum? Like, what do you have to do to break the coalition that is formed and all of the wind that's behind this particular administration? You've mentioned in the past, Doug, that you think something like COVID, but everybody's ready for COVID. Like, you're going to have to put a real spin. Whatever the COVID play is going to be, whatever the new COVID's going to be, you're going to have to cook up something really tricky because everybody's ready for it. Do you have any idea on what might happen?
I think the only play left, honestly, is assassination. And I think they've been outmaneuvered there because I think Vance is assassination insurance. So they could assassinate Trump or they could assassinate Elon.
Yeah.
But if they did something like that, it would simply make everyone on the right beyond furious, and they're not going to stop with the Department of Education.
And Vance would be a very effective Mark Antony if Caesar goes down.
Correct.
Right. He would know exactly, I think, how to do whatever he needed to do.
And I would tag something on to what you said about generations. I think Trump, and I'm speaking civically here, not of a spiritual awakening, but Trump has found a real sweet spot that you can see in him taking advice from Barron on going on the podcasts and that sort of thing. So you've got Trump is a boomer. All right. So this whole thing is being led by a boomer, but he has the energy of the young cohort, which he didn't have in Trump 45. Right. So when he came in the first time, I think he was a boomer. And he was thinking like a businessman. I'll come in and take over this big corporation, and
everybody will do what I want them to do because I'm in charge.
And I'll fire some people, and they'll treat me with respect because I'm the CEO.
Right.
And he was, I think, frankly, outmaneuvered on COVID, outmaneuvered on the vaccine. I think he was outmaneuvered, although he had some wins, like the Supreme Court and federal judges all over the place. So it was a net gain, Trump 45, but it was not possible for him to do then what he's doing now.
Right.
And it would not have been possible had he been elected in 2020. I think he was elected in 2020, but had he taken over, he wouldn't have been holding the four aces that he's holding now.
Yeah, he would have still had Mike Pence would have still been the assistant
Backup.
who was going to be very
He would have been
old guard bureaucratic.
There would have been
GOP.
a lot of sabotage going on, which I believe you know something about.
I may have written a book or two actually now. Speaking of,
right
it's
there.
right there. Right in front of us.
Look at the product placement.
Yeah.
So when Trump comes into this administration, and they clearly were prepared, clearly had everything, all the airplanes lined up on the runway, ready to go, day one, and they were prepared, and the energy, you know, like at Doge, the cyber whiz kids that Elon has got.
Yeah.
That is young. The glory of young men is their strength, and Trump has tapped into that. It's sort of like they are Barron's generation, right? And Trump is the kind of boomer who listens to these kids, and these kids are the kind of kids who will respect a leader like that.
Right. Yeah. It's startup energy.
Right. It's startup energy.
Right. And for that to be his second term having startup energy is wild. But you mentioned like
and you have to in startup energy, you have to have 19-year-olds willing to sleep under the ping pong table.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the if they were to try something like COVID this time around, I think that only would work if a Fauci type got in the building, which I don't think. Where we are now, I don't think Fauci or anybody who operates that way or lifelong, sort of government employee gets in, and it definitely doesn't get the microphone.
Yeah, well, I think one of the interesting things about it is, I saw somebody comment on Twitter about how conservatives are celebrating RFK, and I think it's better to say conservatives recognize their position in a coalition that includes RFK.
Yeah.
And I think that shift, I think, is one that some conservatives of the more purist variety who've gotten their conservatism from big, thick books and who have there's a theological counterpart to this, the sort of person who has all of their system worked out. And their system says, on the one hand, that there's one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, and they can't get along with any of them, right? And there's a certain kind of political counterpart where and because they're purists, they can't fathom why someone like you, who thinks what RFK would do on abortion is atrocious, would still be glad that he would be doing it, recognizing, well, if we had a nation that could elect full on, the kind of conservative who would do everything that we like that Trump is doing, plus have the sort of marital fidelity of a Mitt Romney, then it'd be like, yeah, I'd take that.
Yeah.
But so far, all I get with the Mitt Romney types is loss, give in, capitulate. And so in order to get a win, if I have to do that, then for the good of the country and for the good of my neighbor, I'd rather have that, even if it means having a guy. So there's a coalitional mindset that I think when you're talking about that younger generation that recognizes in the tribal state of affairs that we're in, uniting with other tribes, recognizing that, hey, this is just a temporary coalition, probably. Like there's because at root, at sort of like deep foundational level, Elon's project and RFK's project isn't Christian nationalism. It's not Christ is Lord. That's not down there at the bottom. But it's like, but right now all we're trying to do is raise to the ground the edifice of bureaucratic managerialism. We want that to collapse. And then at that point, then we can talk about what we're going to build.
It's the old tried and true distinction between allies and co-belligerents. An ally is someone who's fighting the enemy for the same basic reasons that you are. A co-belligerent is someone who happens to be fighting the same enemy that you are. So Stalin was a co-belligerent with us in the Second World War. He was fighting the same direction we were because Hitler double-crossed him. Britain was an ally. We were fighting alongside Britain, and we happened to be fighting alongside the Soviets. So allies and co-belligerents. And RFK is a co-belligerent. He's not an ally. But if you insist on purity, here's the other thing, is this is a coalition of ideological misfits that will not govern for the next 20 years. Something's going to have to give. But as far as this destructive work is concerned, everybody's of one mind, right? And the RFKs of this world have to be working side by side with many evangelical Christians.
Right.
They've got to bend also.
Which is why, the assurances that seemed like, I don't remember if it was Josh Hawley or there was a couple of senators that basically came out with, we've asked him, here was our list of demands, basically as pro-life, Christian social conservatives. Here's what we said, hey, we want this policy back. Biden got rid of this policy, we want it back. We did this, we want defunding of Planned Parenthood. And even though RFK might like the work that Planned Parenthood does because of his views on abortion, in a Doge era, it's like, well, we're not going to spend money on that. And so there's a good example of a co-belligerency. They want the cost savings of defunding Planned Parenthood. We want to save the babies' lives, but at the end of the day, we're getting the same result.
Yeah. What's going to be interesting about like the runway here is you mentioned there's destructive work. I see two ingredients to the vibe shift right now. One is destruction, like Doge, cut, reduce, hack it to pieces. The second part of that vibe, though, is just men of like vocation and diligence. So Trump's that way, the Gaza thing. What are we going to do with Gaza?
Serve umbrella drinks.
The Riviera of the Middle East. And that, what's so fascinating, though, is that actually is this entrepreneurial mind that he has and that Elon has. That's a big part of the vibe. And if you have that kind of impulse in your movement, and a lot of destruction to do, which all of the older types, they always want a smaller government. they're hitting that perfect middle. They're like two pistons. They're just bam, 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 because everyone is for shrinking government at the moment, and everyone wants some energy at the moment. And there's enough government to shrink that this could run on for a couple decades. Like we could just stay in this vibe. But eventually, once you have reduced, there is the question of subsidies for businesses. If that came out, and I think this was in the book Up From Conservatism. I think I don't know if it was Patagonia, but somebody just said, look, Patagonia is a destructive entity, and you need to give subsidies to other entities that are going to go and destroy Patagonia. So leaning in, and that's going to mess up the pistons. So if you at some point, that needle's going to start to move where the young energy is going to say, yeah, and by the way, we want to pay you a lot more money to have kids, and then this other piston's going to halt. But I think, again, we've got a couple decades of destroying at the moment.
Well, and I think that thinking ahead on those things to go, like, where are the likely touch points, and how for the evangelicals that are in those positions, working, like what are you trying to do? So when I looked at the transgender stuff that he did, there were parts of it that I actually thought were an accommodation to the political moment. It was all about girls' sports, and there was a feminist impulse. We were protecting female spaces, but it wasn't going to the root and cutting off feminism altogether. But even in there, it was we have to say what's true, right? Like, so there was it wasn't just expediency. It was like men are men, women are women, and we're going to say that that's what it is. It's just true, and if it's not, it's harmful to the republic. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that our friend Jeff Schaefer, who works for the Hale Institute, has said is that the big task of law is to try to bring harmony to all of this disharmony. Like, there's a coherence impulse. All lawyers do are to try to figure out, how does this precedent and that precedent fit together? And that means that you need to have something to work with. And so principles like that, men are men, women are women, and it's true because it's true, are the sort of thing that in 5-10 years, a future administration could work with to say, well, the next step is marriage is marriage.
Yeah, right? And I think
and all of that groundwork is getting laid, and it's the sort of groundwork that if you asked Trump or you asked Elon, hey, the next thing, the thing that really needs to go is Obergefell. That just needs to go like Roe does. I think they would not want that. I think they would say, no, we want to get rid of the T, but we want the LGB to still be here and happy. We want the normal gay guys to be cool with us. But this is where, if God, we should pray that God's telling this story, because there's a whole bunch of legal, Federalist Society legal guys who have been training for years and years about constitutionalism. And so when you go to the bench of who are we going to put in all these judges, it those kind of guys, the sort of guys who would go, yeah, but the Constitution doesn't say that. Right? That's not in there. So we have to get rid of it. And so it could be that Trump, despite himself, he deliberately put in judges who would get rid of Roe. He may put in judges who would get rid of Obergefell, and he might be dead by then, by the time that comes back around. Or he might still be alive and going, no, I don't like this. But the point is that kind of like 1-2 punch, not coordinated by anybody on earth, but very manifest in terms of the providential, would be just great and something we should.
But that's absolutely the next big battle that has to be joined, is Obergefell.
Yeah, and I think that Christian men who speak on podcasts across our land, those who are looking to move the Overton window, are in danger of underestimating how willing some of the practitioners are to actually move that needle right now. So if you deal with, like, if you're a lawyer and you're a Christian and you're tapped into a lot of the recent Protestant political theory stuff, you still have to walk into the courtroom and use the rules on the book to win. And so, but you're vibing off of the movement on the cultural level. And I'm hearing from guys on the ground that are just shocked at what they feel freed up to say now because of Trump. So they've been working for years to be able to move some things that Trump just said, I'll just pull out my pen and we'll just change that. And they're like, oh, we can do that? We can. So I think Obergefell is actually on the table in ways we don't anticipate. They're ready. They're just sharpening their knives. They just this is the season to go and get all the ground that you can get. That everything's pushing in that direction. We should sound the alarms. Obergefell, it needs to go, and it needs to go in a year. Make it go in a year. It should be the banner that we raise.
I think the other place that's interesting, and I'm curious about that. There's a tension I see, and it's come out I think in the confirmation hearings. So one of the big memes that come out of the confirmation hearings was here's Pete Hegseth or I forget who were the other guys, basically who were getting yelled at by female senators. And just, Hegseth was the big one. There was a couple of others, though, that was just
Patel
basically...
was one, yeah.
Yeah, Patel, and there was just a number of
RFK.
different folks who were just getting absolutely school-marmed to death and just had to sit there and take it. But knowing that this is the gauntlet that you have to run in the 21st century is you have to go get yelled at by harpies in the Senate, and then you can get to work, right? Then just get through that, and then you get to go to work. And so there's this interesting thing where if you call it the vibes, there is a very masculine builder, go-getter vibe to the entire Trump thing. We're just going to go, boom, 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 boom. But it's still ideologically at some level committed to feminism, right? Like on paper. But I'm just wondering, like, at some point, does that how that tension resolves? I think will be a really fascinating thing, because Trump as a person, the putting forward of, so we're going to have a female Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who I'm sure is a great person, but just like there's still this we're going to brag about how many female legislators we've elected and how many women we put into office, and there's still this sort of get the women, get the women, get the women, because we're. That's a really important sort of equality sort of thing. That's still there. Like the GOP is just as committed to that. But all of the vibes are not that. Trump getting shot, standing up, fight, was not that, right? A lot of the activity, the great man stuff with Elon is not that. And so what happens when masculine energy runs into paper feminism down the road, I think is going to be a super interesting element.
And the question is going to be what you said, just as committed. Is the GOP just as committed?
Right.
Because I don't think that anybody is ashamed that Pete Hegseth is the nominee or got through.
Yeah.
And I don't think the same with RFK and things like that. I mean, RFK is actually a great example because the person he's replacing was a man dressed as a woman.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and so
upgrade no matter what.
Yeah, right. And so, I don't think that they're as embarrassed about being able to put forward people that they just think are going to be good for the job. And so, the vibe shift is real. But all the iconography, the meme of the women yelling at Pete Hegseth is part of that vibe.
But another part of this, and this is a sociological observation. I'm not applauding anything, but another thing is the proliferation on the right of what you might call bikini babe, and anti-feminism.
Yeah,
right. And that really is a stick in the eye of the feminists. It's also something that Christians would disapprove of.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're doing that to offend the Christians.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the energy for that is offending the feminists. And I think it's when you get to a certain point where you have the Herodins in the Senate and the people saying you're objectifying women, all of that, you're going to get to a critical mass at some point, and people are going to say, enough, done.
Yeah. What do we think about, you did the quote, Napoleon, what was it? What did he tweet?
He who
saves his country violates no law.
Violates no law.
He who saves his country violates no law. Part of the big fear on the left and among the never Trump right is that he is Caesar. He thinks he's Napoleon. He thinks he's above the law. What do you? Should we be worried about that? Should we be worried about sort of the tyrant Trump?
If Trump were to do that, declare himself Caesar or Franco, if he were to do that, that would be bad. Okay, that would be bad. It would also be more of the same. We've had that. Basically, he's blunt enough to say things out loud.
Yeah.
But most of my adult life has been lived under people who believe that.
Right.
Okay. They believe they're saving the country. They believe that their agenda. Thomas Sowell has a great book, The Vision of the Anointed, and the subtitle is Public Policy as Self-Congratulation as Public Policy. And the left defines democracy as anything that advances their party, their agenda. That is democracy. So Trump can get elected democratically, carry 7 swing states. He can win the Electoral College. Every democratic metric you can think of, he carries it, and he's a threat to democracy. And he's a threat to democracy because he interferes with their plan. So and their plan is to save the country. And because they're saving the country, they're not violating any law.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, this is what Trump tweeted there is yesterday's newspaper. And that's the thing. It's ironically, he's done more in 3 weeks to undo the sentiment of that tweet than all the conservatives in my adult life.
Right. Yeah, that's it is much more like how FDR acted. Was much more like that, and the way that he's acting is much more just like a president. So Trump acting like a president looks like a tyrant to most people because he's leading the executive branch and taking out all of the roadblocks to his being able to operate it. And it looks like authoritarianism because it's a guy doing the job that's in the Constitution.
Right, as opposed to the bureaucratic morass that had been erected to keep him as a feeble figurehead.
A Joe Biden.
A Joe
type,
Biden, right, yeah, exactly.
He's also doing the job that he was elected to do. So this is what kind of makes he tweeted what he tweeted, but they can also say, look, we have a mandate. Like so I've seen a few of Elon's updates. He's standing there in the White House, and it's like, hey, by the way, all your stuff's like in files in caves, and by the way, people that are 232 years old are getting Social Security, and the idea is, well, no, look, we're doing
their heroism at Gettysburg.
we're still in the realm of them accomplishing what they were elected to accomplish. I do think we have a long-term problem. And until we acknowledge a genuine authority that's deeper than the Constitution, right? Until we do that, we're eventually going to get tyranny, and we're going even if it's the tyranny of the people, if it's Vox Populi, Vox Dei. But like Doug said, it's yesterday's news. It's been that way for a very long time, and Trump just has a way of making it public and explicit what people are doing behind. And I'd rather have somebody being public and explicit about it than working behind the scenes.
Yeah. And because of the way that administrative law has grown up, many of the things he's doing are technically illegal. And so he's maybe scoffing at laws that are actually laws on the books. But
all of the accretions that have been built up, he's just saying, but I'm just going to do it and provoke a quote unquote constitutional crisis.
But think about it this way. Let's say Elon and Trump just have an amazing run, and everything they attempt to do, they succeed in doing. They cut the Department of Education; it's no more. They audit the Pentagon. They cut the Pentagon's budget in half. They get other countries to reduce their budget. So let's say the federal government shrinks by 2/3. Okay. What kind of sense does it make for Trump to say, I want to be an autocratic ruler over a government that is a tiny fraction of what it was?
It's he who slashes all of these unjust laws breaks no law. That's what he's really doing. He's just cutting away all of the mess.
Yeah, try to explain it to me like I'm 5. Try to make it make sense.
Oh no, I forgot. I shrunk that government.
I think that this is where the brilliance, I think, of the rhetoric actually is really impressive, because by tweeting out a quote from Napoleon, right, he guarantees that he's going to make all of the progressives light their hair on fire. Everybody's going to be upset about this, and it's going to. And so, what's the news item of the day? That. And then when they actually point at what did he do, it was like
reduce Napoleon's power.
he found more waste. He said that men are men and women. He closed the border, and so it was like, so I saved the country by ignoring all of the laws all the laws demanded, all these bureaucratic rules demanded that we let in all of these migrants. Mm-hmm. Our border patrol was not a border patrol; it was a migrant processing agency. That's all they did was process migrant after migrant and release them into the country. That's what the rules said. So I just said we're not going to do that anymore because I wanted to save the country. And I think that just the positioning that he's setting up, like like whether it's JD on free speech or whether it's on the border or whether it's these different issues. And so far, at least, the left seems determined to put themselves in the position he wants them to be in, defending all of these indefensible things. And I'm curious to see whether at what point does somebody finally figure out we should stop doing that if from a political standpoint, we don't want to keep defending we don't want to be anti-free speech, anti-border, anti. We don't want to be in that position. And he keeps maneuvering us into it.
Yeah. Emotionally turbulent people don't tend to make great political calculations.
That's right. That's right. Anything that that he's done you haven't liked so far? Any action of the administration over the last month or so that you've thought, that was a whiff, or that was a foul ball? Anything?
There's been some, I'll be interested to see how that goes, things.
Okay.
I think the Gaza thing is one where I'm just going, okay, we'll see what that means and if it's a negotiation tactic. I think that's a big part of it is me interpreting quite a bit of it through the art of the deal.
Yeah.
So that if he makes a big demand or
says something crazy,
says
like
something that sounds, oh, wow, you're going to build resorts in Gaza. Interesting. Then it just makes me go, okay, well, I guess we'll see what the counteroffer is.
What he did with Panama is it was the art of the deal. We'll take it over. They violated everything, and so then Panama cancels that agreement with China, and Trump got what he wanted. So I think Greenland, Canada, and Gaza and Panama are likely art of the deal moves. Although it's possible that Canada is on the verge of collapsing. They're in big financial trouble. Right.
We may have to liberate Canada.
Yeah. I did see a clip circulating from an episode of The Golden Girls.
Okay.
And did you guys see this one going around? There's a clip from The Golden Girls from back in the 70s or 80s.
I can't believe I scrolled past that.
Yeah, I know, right? But the reason I noticed it is because in the clip, this woman basically says, you know what we should do to solve the Middle East problem? We should just move all of the Palestinians to Greenland. That was in the episode.
All right.
And all of a sudden, you just the wheels start spinning, and you go like, "Oh man,
How old was Trump at this time?
Yeah,
was
did
he watching
Trump
television?
get his foreign policy from an episode of The Golden Girls? Are there other things?
It's a very popular show.
Yeah, that's right. Should we go watch old reruns of The Golden Girls to figure out what's next? I don't know. I think somebody should be on that. I don't know. Maybe Wade. I don't know. You're kind of the media guy.
I gotta get some DVDs. I guess.
Speaking of pop culture, prophetic pop culture, there's that book in the latter part of the 19th century called Baron Trump, the Last President.
Yeah. It's wild. Memes of Baron are wild.
There's a rabbit hole there.
I mean, it's like a modern day prophecy stuff going
That's
on.
right.
There.
That's right.
I would just say this isn't a.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Paula White.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd have kind of two critiques. One, the Paula White thing is the easy one. Like that wasn't a good move. But kind of like we said earlier, I do think that's yesterday's news. I think it's like the kind of that weird evangelical deal is so entrenched that for Trump, it's probably like, yeah, let's go with Paula White. She's been around a long time. She's been doing that. But that's obviously not good. And then on the other, it's just kind of a critique with a wink, is as excited as we are about winning, I'm suspicious that if any of us normal conservatives were to see how big the administrative state really is, that we've only barely nicked the top of the iceberg. So I would say another critique is, could you actually drive like even faster? Could you do even more? Like just cut and slash. Like we need something, whatever we think is kind of crazy and radical, we'd like you to just times 10 because I think it's huge.
And I think that if they're making that move on purpose, if they're going maybe slow at first on something like deportations, things like that, if they're making people want more, I think that's a good thing because that gives them a second mandate. Like what they did with the USAID thing, what they did was they listed out all the terrible corruption, all the things they were doing, and then they took the logo off the building. So they made us want it, and then they gave it to us. So my hope is that it's that kind of move.
It's a setup. Yeah. Did you have a?
Well, Trump could say, I don't listen to my spiritual advisors anyway. And I'm paying my debt. He's a transactional businessman. And she was a supporter of him from years early on. And so he's a ring giver, and he's handing out positions that may or may not influence anything. but she is a bad pick for all kinds of reasons. And so that's something I'd say, oh, that was not well done. But I think he probably has reasons that are not nothing to do with spirituality.
Yeah. It's sort of like saying that Kimberly Guilfoyle is probably not the best ambassador to Greece.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we know.
You're like,
we're aware.
yeah,
No,
but
no.
you had to give, some kind
something.
Of, yeah. No, I thought the same one about that. And the one thing was, I mean, this is few of us jumped on that train early enough. No other Christians. Most Christians who voted for him, the 80% of evangelicals who voted for him the first time, did so reluctantly. Right. And there weren't very many who actually bought in. Paula White bought in from the earliest. There's enough similarities there, unfortunately, that the showmanship, the adultery, all of it. She's got all of it. So she jumped in early.
But not with a band member of Journey.
So
I know that.
So that it makes sense that she got in early, and so she's getting paid. But does the office of faith and whatever it is, how much does it actually matter? I mean, so I'd rather have an evangelical in the office of management and budget. So Russ Vought is like would I rather have someone with Paula White's theology and Russ Vaught's job, or would I rather have him? And it's like him because he's actually going to do the things I want. She'll be a figurehead that'll get trotted out. But it's still a whiff. It's still a foul ball. It's not what you want.
Unless she's giving him prophecies about Gaza.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe that's where it's.
There's that.
She might have been on that episode of Golden Girls. I can't quite remember. Well, good. Well, we'll keep an eye on this. It'll be interesting to see next time we come together.
Yeah, we're locked in the funhouse.
Yeah, this is you're not locked in. You're locked in here with me. So with that, check out Lunatic Farmer, the documentary about Joel Salatin, coming out here from Canon Plus later this week.
It really is good.
If you're looking for a new book, Sin of Empathy drops also hereabouts, and if you want to learn how to resist some of the sabotage, that's a second round of that. And until next time, go fight, win.